Welcome back, Praggies, for another episode of Pragmatic Optimists. I am State Senator Tiara Mack, and I am joined by Rachel, who's an attorney, and we tried to keep you guys hopeful and optimistic in the sea of chaos that is our current political landscape. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share to Legal AF, Pragmatic Optimists, all on the Midas Touch Network, which has officially eclipsed Joe Rogan as the #1 news source. So super honored and proud to be on this platform. And today we are going to be talking about Texas and all of the fuck shit that is happening in Texas, especially around the congressional maps, which has been in the news for a very long time. This is a continuous news cycle, and it has only gotten crazier this week as Texas Democrats have now fled the state, some going to Illinois with J.B. Pritzker, who is a presidential hopeful for 2028. They are risking arrest, and they are also looking at $500 a day fines. And this is all to protect our democracy, because a few weeks ago, Donald Trump told Governor Greg Abbott to create for him 5 additional congressional seats in Texas so that they have a more comfortable governing majority in Congress, which, if you know anything about gerrymandering, it is generally frowned upon and generally disenfranchises Black and brown voters, which is something that things like the Voting Rights Act, which is also on the chopping block, super sad to say. So we are going to dive into, again, all of the fuck shit that is happening in Texas. And I am super excited as a state legislator to uplift all of the amazing people who are standing 10 toes down for our democracy by preventing a quorum. They have left the state. This is not the first time that Texas legislators have prevented a quorum by leaving the state. I was reading an article by the Texas Tribune, which has been my personal kind of window into all things Texas General Assembly over the last couple of days. But it is a really incredible show of how you stand up against tyrants and how you can use peaceful protests and peaceful strategic maneuverings in our legislative process in order to prevent power grabs. So again, standing 10 toes down for our democracy in Texas. And Rachel, before we get started into the meat of it, what have you been hearing or seeing about all the things that is happening in Texas and these maps?
I am so excited to learn from you today, Tiara, I'll be honest, because I think that this is a story that everyone wants to talk about, and very few people have the kind of insight that state legislators do in this moment. But in terms of what I'm hearing, so much optimism. I think that this is a story that was built for us, honestly, as people who are pragmatic optimists who want to demand more from our electeds and from our system, but also really want to uplift people when they're doing the work. And I have to say that it has been absolutely delightful to see these Texas Democrats leave, to see them be committed to running out this special session that Greg Abbott called because he is Trump's bitch, not to, I don't approve of using that word in a patriarchal sense, but in this instance, it feels unavoidable because I just don't understand how you call up the governor of a state and say, get me 5 congressional seats, and everyone just goes along with that. I think that we should really be talking about how embarrassing Republicans are that they will just let a reality television show host turned president pick up the phone and say, sell out our democracy for me. And they will, in the hopes of getting him to gift them some crypto or whatever. And so in this moment, seeing all of those Texas electeds come off of the plane into my state of residence, Illinois, to my governor, J.B. Pritzker, it gave me a lot of hope, I think, in terms of not just that they are resisting on this one issue, but that I think that something I struggle with a lot is that I don't think that we're dreaming big enough in terms of how we resist this moment. The Republicans are moving very rapidly towards this kind of one state authoritarianism, and we're going to have to start thinking creatively. So I'm excited to kind of be on board uplifting these Texas Democrats. I know that there are so many people that have their backs. I saw a bunch of planes were flying today with the little banners behind them that say "Mess with Texas." One of my friends shared over a variety of different state capitals. And I think that that is one of the big takeaways is when we have a system that is being really the Republicans are ignoring the norms of the system, and systems are made up of individuals. If we don't have people enforcing those norms, then they collapse. We've seen that over and over again with the law firms, with attacks on universities. We need people who are in positions of power to not allow business as usual when the business is not as usual and is instead just authoritarianism spreading. And so I feel, and I know that I'm hearing from many of my friends and colleagues, a lot of excitement and gratitude towards the Texas electeds, the Texas Democrats that are leaving, because they are putting a lot on the line. I know that people have children. I know that people are traveling with families. They are risking arrest. And it's one of those things where I think that's kind of what a lot of electeds need to be willing to risk in this moment in order to stand up for what is right and to protect the very fabric of our democracy, honestly, because Texas is already gerrymandered to hell, right? I can't believe they found 5 more.
I think the thing that is so funny in this moment, I get it, gerrymandering's bad, don't do it, blah, blah, blah. I have let the courts figure that shit out. The Republicans are going to tell us that this is the playbook, and we're just going to sit back. And some people are like, well, no, gerrymandering's bad, don't do it. If they are going to do it and the courts are going to allow them to, the rules have changed. They have changed the rules, and we have to, as Democrats, be ready. And I love Michelle Obama, 10 toes down for that lady. And she endured a lot as the first lady of our country, called egregious names. And I'm so glad that she, this is a huge side note, decided not to go to this new president, if you can call him that, inauguration, and like has stepped out of the limelight, because she's like, you know what, y'all put me through the ringer when I was the face of this country, the first Black face of this country. But when she said, when they go low, we go high, I'm like, Michelle, I love the sentiment. When they go low, we go lower. We go subterranean. We go underneath. Like, we are subways, public transit queen. They want to go low. I actually am going to go. I'm going to go lower because I'm a subway. I believe in public transportation, and we need to actually start learning how to play their petty playbook. Because if they want to play silly games, let's go. Let's actually hold the courts accountable to the rule book that the Republicans decided that they are going to set up and play by. You want to gerrymander Texas? California and New York already said, hey, we actually can do the same thing. We got seats, we got numbers. And I recently saw a tweet today that was like, if you combine California, New York, and there was one other state that I'm forgetting, that is like 93 seats versus the 66 seats that Texas is looking at gerrymandering. So again, you want to start the gerrymandering game? The Democrats will win because you have already disenfranchised our communities, especially in the South. And I think it is poetic justice that it's a place like Texas. So many people think the South is a place where people are not organizing, where there are not deep blue people and places that Democrats on the left can win. And we are going to be shown through this process that there are people who are ready to say the South is not the Republicans' playing ground. And that's something that fills me with hope. And and another thing that I have to uplift as a state legislator, these are people putting their lives and livelihoods on the line for $7,200. $7,200 a year is what a Texas state legislator makes. They also only meet once every other year. So they serve 2-year terms, and they meet 1 year out of those 2-year terms to go to Austin, Texas. They are going to, especially if they are working class elected officials like myself, they have full-time jobs in addition to representing their home districts in Texas. These are people who are putting their livelihoods on the line. They are potentially going to risk not being able to come back to a job because they're going to be indefinitely wherever they're staying. A majority are in Illinois, some are in the Northeast, some were in DC for conferences. It's conference season, so a lot of people are traveling anyway. But I don't think a lot of the public has let it sink in that these are regular, everyday heroes who put on their capes to stand 10 toes down for democracy and say that we are not going to let a tyrant who has an authoritarian agenda take our maps and draw whatever he wants in order to have a power grab. They have left their families. They have left their friends. They are potentially not going to see people get married. They're going to potentially risk not seeing people who are in hospitals, loved ones. They are going to have to figure out childcare. They're going to have to figure out how their lives back in Texas are going to move on without them. Again, a lot of these people are people who are not independently wealthy, do not own their own businesses, and make $7,200 a year in order to represent their district. districts. And so one thing that fills me up with hope is that these are regular, everyday Americans who, yes, raise their hands to be public servants, but are raising their hand again and saying that we are going to defend our democracy. We are going to defend the right to have ungerrymandered districts. We're going to make sure that representation, particularly of Black and Brown people, is going to be protected. And Texas is not new to this. I saw Jasmine Crockett today, who I absolutely love, media starling, who posted her warrant from 2021 when she also fled the state to prevent a quorum. She posted today that when they were in Texas, also on some gerrymandering and elections bullshit, which is, I guess, Texas's specialty, they also had a quorum of Democrats leave the state and stayed, I believe it was for 37 days. And Jasmine Crockett, who was then a state rep, was on the front lines then leading the charge and has since been elevated to one of the most fierce congressional women in the House right now, who is also a fundraising juggernaut. So I am super happy to see that places like Texas are using the rule book to their advantage, and they're not cowering down to this playbook. It sometimes can seem like a big daunting task to stand up to the bully, to the villain, which in this instance and for the last I don't know, however long, Republicans have been the villain, but people are standing up and saying, we know your playbook. And yes, in 2023, you're going to introduce a piece of legislation that is going to fine us $500 a day. Bring it. We're going to fundraise. We have deep war chest, and we are going to fight back against this tyrannical power grab. And so I am filled with hope. And I hope that later today, when I'm going to a conference with other legislators from around the state, I see some Texas legislators and personally shake their hands and thank them, because in addition to being in the headlines, great, awesome. It sounds like a really cool story, but there is a lot on the line for these people. And the fact that they raise their hands to say, yes, we will flee the state and will suffer the consequences, arrest, warrants, fines, leaving their families. But they're doing that because they are public servants and they know exactly what is on the line for the American public. So we continue to think about that. Tell me what else you're thinking before we launch into what's keeping us hopeful.
Well, I think that this is the story that's keeping me hopeful, to be fair. And so there's just a couple of threads that I want to make sure to tie together before we close or before we kind of finish up for the day. The first is that I think that what I am kept hopeful by every time I see somebody in a red state acting to preserve democracy, to preserve rule of law norms, etc., is I'm reminded that Democrats in red states, number one, 42% of Texas voted for Harris in the last election. So I think that often we get into this really awful idea that red states kind of deserve what they voted for or whatever, when it's really not a particularly large margin of victory, even in an election like this one where voter turnout was quite low, especially among Democrats. I think that people don't realize, if they're not from these states, just how tough you get being a Democrat in a blue state. And I think that it does not surprise me at all that Texas Democrats are the ones that are showing out with these backbones and these spines, because they have been pushed on their politics before. And I would challenge state legislators and national level electeds from more true blue states and districts to really match that energy, because I do often find that that is where it's lacking. Some of the senators, for example, in the US Senate, who are relatively centrist in these moments are people from states like New York. And so I think that it's really important to remember that when we have strong majorities, that is a sign to push the politics further and not to sit complacently, because people that do not have those strong majorities are putting their livelihoods on the line, exactly as you've said, to make sure that we do not slide further into this hellscape. And so I think that that's a powerful reminder. And I think that also one of the points that you've made around remembering that these state legislators, especially in places like Texas, where they meet every 2 years, these are everyday people. And I think that we can all challenge ourselves to think a little bit harder about how we individually can stand up for justice can stand against authoritarianism in our community. And whether that's engaging with a mutual aid group, there's so many court watch organizations that are springing up in response to ICE disappearing people right now, for example. And there's so many mutual aid responses that are trying to fill the gap as the government wipes out huge swaths of kind of financial supports for people who are struggling. And I would just challenge everyone who is watching what's happening in Texas and feeling like, wow, that's so incredible, but that's not really for me. Those are just everyday people, the same as me and you, a little bit more like you than they are like me, but still, I think that we could all challenge ourselves to think a little bit more outside the box about how we can show up right now. And Tiara, before we wrap, what's keeping you hopeful?
This is a little bit of a silly one because, yes, Texas is giving me a lot of hope. It has bred some strong women, especially in this moment, and co-signing everything that you're saying. But recently, the Connecticut Suns, which I'm wearing their shirt right now, have announced they might be open to being sold to the Boston area. And so women's basketball could come a little bit closer to me. And that's giving me a lot of hope. Lesbians everywhere, WNBA fans everywhere, I think could use in our expansion over the next couple years, more basketball teams. But I am personally, Boston's about an hour away from where I live. Connecticut was like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But women's basketball could be coming closer to me, and the buzz is buzzing. So I wore my Connecticut Suns t-shirt today in honor of them potentially moving closer to me in basketball. And that's giving me a lot of hope. In addition to Jasmine Crockett staying that girl, being that girl since she was a state rep and now as a congresswoman.
Amazing. I think that's a great place to leave it. I am excited to see who continues to be elevated by this, because I know that this is one of the ways that Jasmine Crockett got kind of national attention back 4 years ago. And I know that there will be other people emerging to lead, and I look forward to seeing who they are. But don't forget to subscribe to Legal AF over here on Midas Touch. You can follow along with myself and Tiara on our personal social media, and we'll see you soon.
And don't mess with Texas.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.